if you could live your life judgment-free? Are you ready to live the unapologetic, confident life that God designed for you? If you are, then this is the place to be. Welcome to the Bold, Brave, and Sassy Show. It's time to break free of physical, spiritual, and heart-centered challenges that have held you back for way too long. Listen in for powerful tips and tools to help you break free today. Hear from leading experts along with me, Annie Berryhill, your host and personal guide to freedom. Now it's time to live like no one's judging. Let's go. Hey everybody, this is Annie Berryhill and welcome to the Bold, Brave, and Sassy Show. I am super excited that you are here today because I have one of my most favorite people in the whole world that I've only known for less than a year. She's quickly risen to the top of my favorites list, and she is Miss Jereshia Hawk, and you are going to just be fascinated with her story. She is a powerhouse young woman. I think I have a crush on you. I think that's what's going on. I think you're just so amazing. I wish I could be you. But Jereshia, let me tell you a little bit about her. She is an income strategist, and she's a recent corporate dropout. And she helps content creators, coaches, and consultants by their revenue through online positioning and sales strategy. Now, a little bit about her personally. Jereshia enjoys long walks down the school supply aisle at Target. Yeah, baby. And yes, geeks out over Post-it notes and pens. If you want to leverage corporate strategies to help your service-based business exponentially grow, not only your impact, but your income, she is the woman for you. So welcome, Jereshia. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to chat today.
I know. I love it. I loved getting to know you at BBD last year, and we met because we sat at the same table.
Yes.
And you just girl, you just took charge. From the first second, somebody had a question or an idea or a situation. You're like, bam, I got a solution. I was like, who is this? She's like 9 o'clock in the morning on the first day, ready to go. You are just amazing. You are just amazing. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want to give the people that are listening a little bit more insight, a little bit less formal insight into the person that you are. And then we'll go in a little bit more about, so we'll really just start with your story. So you're an income strategist. You help people, make more money with what they want to do. But first off, how old are you, little Miss Thing?
I'm 27 and a half right now.
27 and a half. I was just going to say young enough to be able to say and a half. But I will say, I personally always notice my half birthday. So I'm 52 and I still do it. So give me a little bit of your background, in education wise. Let's start with that.
Yeah. So I started off school in architecture. I'm not sure if anybody listening now or if you are familiar with The Sims, the computer game. I used to geek out over that as a kid, and I would download blueprints of houses offline and then get the cheat codes and rebuild those houses for my Sims in the game. And that's kind of where that type of, passion came from. I loved architecture and structure. So then I went to school, changed my major to civil engineering my sophomore year. And graduate with a civil engineering degree, which is kind of crazy because I never thought I was smart enough to be an engineer, and life happened and it just transitioned that way. I don't know why anybody signs up to take a major where you have to take Calc 1, 2, 3, and 4 all as prereqs. It was a bit intense. You graduate with a minor in mathematics automatically. So that was educational background, but it's kind of a interesting mix because even while I was in school getting my engineering degree, that's kind of when my entrepreneurial journey really, really started. So I was modeling and acting, and I started doing auto shows for Chrysler in college. And that was my first toe dip in what freedom and income could look like, because you would work 2 or 3 days out of the month. At least I did. I did small auto shows because I was in school, but I made way more money than any other kid on campus who would work 40 hours a week on a campus job. So that's really when my mindset started shifting around what is really possible when it comes to exchanging your time for money and really just time for value, which I think is kind of an interesting dynamic being an engineer, but also modeling and traveling the country doing auto shows.
Well, and I do think that like, even though engineering is super structural and super like color inside the lines, and modeling too has its, parameters, like be here, stand like this, do that, whatever specifics. I think there's creativity in everything. In order to be able to design something, you have to have inspiration.
Totally.
Right. And to be able to connect with people, even as a model who's really secondary to the vehicle, I imagine, even though
totally.
Most men probably not, but I think it's just a cool story for you. So when you were growing up, you said you were playing The Sims, and I think that's really funny too, because that's so ambitious. Again, that's just another, like, that's a sign, that's a clue of Jereshia as a grown-up, just go after it. She's like, oh, I can make this better. I'm just going to go get the plans and recreate it myself. So tell us a little bit more about like growing up as Jereshia. Like, did you grow up in a super educated household where everybody was just going after being a doctor and a lawyer and all these high education positions, or what's up with that?
It was an interesting dynamic. So I grew up without my parents. My mother left when I was 2, and I moved out of my father's house around like middle school age, and my grandmother and aunt raised me after that. So it was, my grandmother had a college degree. She was a math teacher in a high school. And my aunt was she was like a regional director over sales for Victoria's Secret. So I think, and they always had like high aspirations for me. So like they were not the ones that were like checking my homework. They were not the ones like really on me when it comes to school. They just kind of expected me to perform. And when I didn't, like I would get the tough love type of situation, even though nobody else, like none of my other siblings or anybody else that was in the house all the time, they did not get that level of scrutiny, which pissed me off because I was one of the youngest. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm like, why am I getting so much like getting ridden so hard? And everybody else in the household is like, oh, they did their best. I'm like, well, I am too, but
right.
So it was kind of interesting. Like from a very early age, I was taught that nobody really owes you anything. I was taught that probably at 11 or 12 in a pretty tough way, just because my parents chose not to be active roles in my life. So they always really reinforced that they chose, it was a decision that they made to take me in and to raise me, that it was not something that I was entitled to. And that really formed and shaped my entire mindset about just how I look at life and how I show up in the world, primarily because, I definitely am experience and just express a ton of gratitude for anything that comes my way, because it's not entitled to me. It's not, somebody doesn't have to do this. They're making the choice to give or to open doors or what have you. I think it was really just on me, like to kind of decide whether or not I was going to college, where I was going to college, how I was going to fund college. That was definitely like all on my shoulders. Those were not regular conversations we had in the household about finances or who was going to be paying for what. It was just like, whatever you want, you need to figure out a solution on how to make it happen. And if you don't, then it won't happen, and you'll just figure out whatever the next best step is.
I think you're like Olivia Pope too.
Oh.
I got it handled. It's handled. Make it happen. It's handled. I think your tagline needs to be something about making it happen.
Yeah.
Because you're like the make it happen girl. And it's fascinating to me to, hear from this background, which, we talked about this before when I met you, when you kind of told me this story, and it's really stuck with me because somebody could take a similar situation that you were raised in and be all sorts of butthurt about it for your entire life. Like, my parents just bailed and I'm not going to, whatever. And I'm just going to, hold a grudge and be hurt forever. But then you move into this environment where they're like, look, we'll put a roof over your head. We'll make sure you eat, but the rest is up to you. And, someone who comes in with sort of a victim mentality will have a totally different response to that kind of attitude, right? But you somehow managed to not take a victim mentality from that place, and old enough to know better. Like, with your dad being in middle school, you're like, well, okay, Dad, although, I don't know the conditions, and it might've just totally been a better thing for everybody. But at the same time, I find that there's so many people that just get so lost in victimhood and this victim mentality that, again, what we talk a lot about on the show is identity. Mm-hmm. So you didn't take on the identity of a victim. You took on the identity of a victor, that you were just going to make it happen. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah. And I think it's, I was not taught this at an early age. Like, as I've come to grow older, I've been hearing this reference more. And I think I understood the concept of this as a child, but didn't understand what the concept was. but that life is never happening to you. It is always happening for you. I didn't understand that concept, but I definitely understood how to embody and how to live that. And that's something I think has really been a driving force for me my entire life, and just something that I continuously remind myself of, that, the struggles and the pain points. Because if I look back at my timeline and I look back at the worst moments of my life that I can remember, those things were always like the stepping stone or the launch pad for the abundance and the like increase that happened right after it. But those down moments had to occur for me to be able to even launch from, to project forward. So
exactly,
life is always happening for you, not to you.
And again, that really is your perspective, right? And perspectives, we knee-jerk our perspectives. We just think this is what we think, that, this is who we are. Some people get really tied to it. But the truth is, we can change our perspective. It's like what they say, if 3 people see a car accident, everybody will have a different report of what happened, right? Because they're looking at it from a different angle. And sometimes for us individually, it takes us making the decision to look at it from another perspective to be able to see that life is for you. And again, being a person of faith, which we didn't even get into yet, like, we have a good God. He is all about love and good for us. And sometimes the good he wants for us comes through trial, most of the time, right? Because I have a son that's a type 1 diabetic, and he was diagnosed at 9.5. And I remember telling him that diabetes will be the fire that burns off the dross to reveal the gold, right? So I would always say that to him. I'm like, this is just, you're getting to the gold, right? And if we understand that, and again, like sometimes, moving into a season of challenge isn't always obvious, like a sign, hey, entering the forest of struggle, it's not like that, and all of a sudden you're standing in the middle of this dark place and you're like, here I am again, now what, and so we emotionally respond to that when we have the realization, but then we can decide, like you did, like yours was survival, and maybe in your little kid brain, it was nothing more than that, but you went on a track. They molded you a lot on a track to just be like, all right, if it's to be, it's up to me.
Totally.
Yeah. So I'd love to know, because, I love to invite women of faith, have a faith basis. I guess the next part is, where did, God, your faith kind of come into that? Because I hear little parts of it in what you're saying, it's like the world is for you. Well, who's the world, or who's running the world, that kind of thing. So tell me a little bit about like that faith journey that has gotten you to this place. Cause I know you've had some pretty significant things happen in your faith journey recently, but tell me a little bit about that, kind of how that feeds into your growth.
Yeah. So I was raised Catholic, and it never jived with me. So we went to church pretty much every Sunday religiously. But it never really connected. Like, I felt like I was just kind of just going through the motions and just being obedient and showing up because my grandma told me I had to, but it never really connected. So I've always, at least known that there was a God, but I didn't really understand what it meant to have a relationship with him. And I definitely did not understand. Like, I would try to read the Bible, in my younger years, and it just felt like gibberish to me. Like I'm reading these stories, but it wasn't really connecting. But I always prayed. So I kind of, when I was like in college and in my teenage years, I just always thought, okay, trying to figure out like, what is my identity in Christ and what is my identity with this higher God being that I'm being taught about, but I don't feel like I have a relationship with. And religion never felt comfortable for me. So I'm just like, well, maybe I can just go down this whole faith and spiritual thing. And I didn't know that was a thing, but I'd always pray and I'd always talk to God. But I still didn't really know, I didn't feel like that was a relationship, or I really didn't know how to define it or what those boundaries were. So that's kind of how it was for me, like in teenage years and through college. And then I would say stepping into corporate, and even like when I stepped into entrepreneurship, that transition is really when I started to develop a relationship with God. And I still didn't know how to define that, I'd say, until more recently. But I remember when I started my business, that's when I started praying even more consistently. And it was like kind of this cyclical, like it was like this organic, I think, thing that happened. So in January of 2016 is when I found my church home. And I went for the first time. After a while, I wasn't like testing out churches anymore, because I'm like, just maybe this religion thing isn't for me. And then I went to a church here in Detroit And like the light bulb finally clicked. Like it didn't feel like a place of this structured obedience, but it felt like, I think the way that God loves, it felt like community. It felt like family. It felt like you could just be human in this space and you're going to be loved and be supported and be built up in God's way. And that's how it felt like. So that was when things really started shifting, because I'm like, okay, I can get down with this. Like if this is what religion and church and faith can look like, this is what I always thought it should look like, just can never find a home that embodied that. I'm like, I'm all for this. And I really started leaning in there. And it took me about a year to really get connected and to like build the community there. But that was really when I started to understand what the difference between knowing God and having a relationship with God was, because it was being taught to me in a way, and I could also see it through examples of other people in the church. And then that's when I feel like my relationship with God really, really, really started to get strengthened and just really started to develop. Easter of this year, Resurrection Sunday, about a month ago now, April 1st, is when I got rebaptized. And that was a huge step for me, just because I feel like I've been allowing God to lead me and really be like the CEO of my business. And my conversations with him have definitely dictated every decision that I have made in my business. Like I always pray before I pursue and ask for permission before I move forward. So this was like my outward commitment to doing that. And life has definitely been really interesting since baptism too.
It's awesome. Thank you for sharing that part, because I was hoping that you would mention the baptism, because I didn't want to like step on it and say, oh, rebaptized. But I mean, it's just hearing you and on the video, being able to see your face and the joy that, you're showing. It's this idea, and I get it. Like it's the same exact journey, growing up Catholic, always knowing there was a God and knowing God, but being more like being afraid of him because he was going to be the judgmental, really hard. Like I remember I think I've said this before on the show, like if I did something or had a bad thought that I was going to get a lightning bolt to the brain, he was just going to shoot it, like that, kind of like a cartoon God, because I was a kid and that's all I knew. But same thing, as I grew, I just learned that like what I needed more than anything was a father figure who was loving and accepting and guiding, and almost like you watch a child take their first steps, and how as parents, we never ever make fun of them or criticize them or put them down. We're like, oh, you fell on your bottom, get up and try again, and I always feel like that's how God talks to us. He's like, oh, you're my girl. I'm so proud of you. Just get up and try again. Don't worry. I like that. I like that vision of him, even though I know for some that would be almost blasphemous, but like he loves us, like come to him like little children. And so I'm super curious to know, because we chatted about this a little bit, because, they say never talk about religion or politics. Right. And so I know for me, God and Jesus are people, they're my guys, they're just there. They're always in my thought process. I'm always consulting them, as things are running through my head. I'm looking at things. I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do with this? And kind of like you, always praying before I proceed. I love that. So how has that moved into, like you talked about the foundation of your business, and how's that been received from the people that you mentor and the people that you teach and coach from the, secular side? Like, has there been pushback, or how's that been for you?
Yeah, it's a question that I got a lot in the beginning from my audience. Like, you're allowed to talk about God and your faith while you're talking about finances and business. And I would get a couple emails from that in the very beginning, but I think now my audience comes to expect it from me. But for me, I guess I never looked at it like I'm talking about religion or politics and it's going to be this controversial thing, but more about just I'm showing up authentically as who Jereshia Hawk is. And my faith and my relationship with God is part of who I am. So in order for me to be unapologetic and just to show up with full transparency, and transparency is definitely one of like my business core values, that just comes along with the territory when you're dealing with me. So it's something that has always been very ingrained. And like in my Facebook lives, sometimes like I really just turn into the true vessel and I'm not the one even talking anymore. And it's just him working through me. My audience can tell when that happens. So they call me like Deacon Hawk, and they like joke around in the comments. We have plenty of like preach gifts that like we're kind of legendary in our comments for it, I believe. So it's something for me that is just very like one and the same, which I'm so thankful for as my business has been growing and the number of students and clients I've been able to support has increased. Majority of my I want to say all, I don't want to say all because everybody hasn't verbally said it, but I'd say the vast majority of my clients are all faith believers. And that's something that we talk about in even how I teach. And it comes up often in my coaching calls or in my mastermind sessions or when I'm just consulting with my students is how is your faith playing into all of this? And are you in alignment with the gift that you've been anointed with? And if you're not, you're going to experience some, I think, rocky momentum as you're growing, primarily because you're not in alignment with what you've been called to be. Or even when I'm teaching a method about, understanding your ideal client and why it's so important, we call it the POP method. Pick one person, pick one problem, package your process into how do you focus and narrow down. It's similar. I'm still learning scripture, but I know that there's a scripture in there that says about the narrow way and how important it is for you to like go down a narrow path and what that looks like. And even using these biblical foundations to help further explain our business concepts. It all started with him anyways. He's the first entrepreneur. That's been something that's been really it's just part of my process on how I coach and teach. And interesting, I want to share like a story that just happened 2 days ago. Really, really random. I was out with my boyfriend, like grabbing lunch, and we're about to pack up and leave. And this woman comes up to me and she just starts breaking down in tears. And she was just like, one of your videos last year changed my life. In the middle of like a Coney Island restaurant here downtown. And it got me super emotional. And she was like, I was laying on the bed or laying on my couch, praying to God, asking him for clarity and direction. Like I knew I was on maternity leave and I knew that I wasn't supposed to go back to work, but I didn't have it to go start my business full time on my own. Like I was all this doubt and worry. And as I was laying on the couch, I was just scrolling on Facebook and your video popped up. And he was like, just thank you so much for being obedient because God, you were incorporating your faith and your spirituality. And you were just unapologetic about that in that Facebook Live video. But that video answered my prayers. Like God spoke through you to speak to me. And that rebuilt my faith for me to step out and go into my business full time. And now my business is doing better than my corporate job was. I'm able to be a real mother for my children. Just like, thank you for that. Oh. And I don't know, like it made me so emotional because she's never purchased anything from me. And it really started to shift my perspective on like, what is the true ROI that we're measuring in our businesses? And it's not about like the money or the finances, but it's about like the faith that we may be building and instilling in other people through us being obedient and showing up. All of that to say, like for me and in my business, I feel like it's just something that is it's one and the same. And when you come into my territory, that's just, it will just naturally come out of me.
It's so powerful because it answers a whole bunch of questions I was going to ask you, because a lot of people who may be listening have become disconnected from believing that God actually has their good in mind, that the world has kind of overcome their confidence, that the world has made them think that everything's scary and that God isn't bigger than all of that. And so we don't do things like from a business perspective, like for a lot of people, video is scary. And so they might not do it. Saying what they believe is true is scary. Doing the thing that like in their deepest part of themselves, they know that's what they should be doing, but yet it's scary. And fear keeps us from so many things. And she exactly said that. Mm-hmm. And it's funny too. I can totally relate to when you were talking about like when you're talking and you check out, Jereshia checks out and God sort of checks in and takes over. I always say, people say, oh, that prayer, what you said was amazing. I'm like, I don't know what I said. I just opened my mouth and God popped out. Mm-hmm. I just feel like that's, he gave me a big mouth for a reason and, the capacity to put words together comfortably. And that's part of your design. And I love the whole topic of ROI because as business people, ROI is all about the numbers and we get so obsessed with that. And you guys listening, this is not Jereshia talking like in theoreticals about making a very good living because she has shared her numbers, not in a way that she's bragging about it because she's talking about her process and how she got to where she got. And, she's already explained she's a numbers girl. She gets the numbers. She's a numbers girl on steroids. She's the real deal, you guys. So she's not talking about like, the Christians who are like, well, money's not okay. And I don't want to pursue money. I just want to pursue love and serving people. That's all good. But God wants you to be prosperous. Mm-hmm. And he is in the center of all that. And when we get quiet and we listen and we surrender and we're obedient to spending time with him and understanding how he operates and what's important to him and work from that, that's when the prosperity starts to show up. That's when the people start to show up. Because isn't her comments to you, aren't they like a form of prosperity right there? Like, did that not just fill you up from the bottom to the top?
Yeah, totally. And that's what, like, when I was going home, I was really just thinking about in business. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the vanity metrics. How many people are watching? How many people are liking? How many people are sharing? How many people are converting from like an actual conversion from money for service type of thing? But we forget about who are all those lives that we're impacting and making sure that we're measuring that ROI of hearts impacted. And how, and I'm not even sure how you would measure it, but just also like by you being obedient and showing up, how are you also like instilling these faith coins into other people? So it's building their faith bank. And I think that to me is the most important thing. I know you were mentioning, and this comes up sometimes in my audience about making money is a bad thing. The only thing that's bad is the love of money, not money itself. And I truly believe that like God is an abundant God. He is a prosperous God. He wants abundance for us, and abundance looks differently for each one of us individually. But I truly believe like rich people can change the world. And when you have more money, you're able to create change and impact sometimes faster than if you don't. I'm all about the numbers and like all about how can we increase our revenue and continue to grow at a consistent, healthy pace. Like one of the things I want to do is give away $1 million by the time that I'm 30. That means I need to make probably about 3.2 million to comfortably give $1 million away after taxes and all the other things. And but that's a form of me of being able to like impact and serve the lives of the people that I'm supposed to touch. So I think it's measuring the numbers and measuring your business financials is critically important for you to like just survive and thrive as a business, but also just not forgetting about the heart's impact that they may not be converting into dollars, but you may be the one like building their faith bank. And that to me is just as important.
Right. Right. And, you know, there's that verse too, that a worker is worth his wages. Right. We're not supposed to work for free because we're believers and we think that God's just going to show up and drop money in our bank account. He expects us to work. I mean, there's so many examples in the Bible of like, we have to take action before God shows up and does what he promises, right? You know, we have to walk into the water up to our shoulders before he parts the seas, you know, I mean, he wants to see that we're committed. And that's a huge part that's missing. I think that people misconstrue that is we have to show him we're in and we're committed and we're willing to take a risk and to go to a scary place and trust him. And there's a lot of times, you know, I have grown children and my husband and my life is kind of weird because our kids stay in one place and we move around, which is typically like when you get to be our age, we're just like sitting in our rocking chairs and they're moving around and we're going to visit them. And it's the reverse in our family. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. So, you know, I will be the first to admit there's times when I'm away from my kids and I'm still mama bear where I am scared, you know, like things are going to happen when I'm not there. But then I'm retraining my brain to not allow those flaming arrows from the enemy to come into my thought process and let me just go to that like old brain that wants to just habitually be like, yeah, worst case scenario, that's what's happening. It's not. I either trust God or I don't. And in that moment, I get to say, boop, put my hand up and go, no flaming arrows, because I trust God. I trust you. And I have to sometimes say that over and over and over to quiet the other voice that tells me that I shouldn't or what there is to worry about. And you know, that's kind of a weird offshoot of what we were talking about, but it applies to everything, whether you're talking about business, whether you're talking about being a parent, whether you're talking about going out on your own and not living with your parents anymore. It doesn't matter. Having a baby for the first time. I mean, all that stuff there's a lot to be scared about in the world, but we have to decide. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's on our side, he wants the best for us. And even in the worst situation, he's still there. And that's what I go back to, like, even if the worst thing happens, you're never, ever going to leave me. So, I mean, that's taken a really dark turn, but, and it's really not that. It's really more to be an encouragement to say like, God, I know you got this, whatever your, you know, verbiage is for that, you got it. Right. Yeah. So it's pretty awesome. And I know that you're so passionate just watching you and hearing your voice. I mean, you're so on fire for both the people that you serve, helping them make more money and then doing it in a way that honors God and honors each of our authentic, unique selves, which is what I'm all about, because I'm not you. I don't have your history. I don't have your DNA. I don't have any, you're not me, right? But there's a lot of similarities in life and a lot of differences. And we really have to honor and celebrate how individual we are. And it's how cool it is, and
absolutely.
It's one of my most favorite things about doing this kind of format is being able to talk to so many people and hear their stories and just be so pumped up about it. So I want to be able to share all that you're doing with my audience. And so I'm going to be sure to put in, your website and the show notes and everything like that. One final thing, I know I always ask my guests if they have anything to share with my audience. Now, do you have anything that you'd like to share, like something you've written, tips and tricks, that kind of thing? And who's that for, really?
Yeah, I say one that's been getting a lot of love right now is my Lurker to Lightbulb challenge.
Okay.
And this is really helping people become fearless on Facebook. And how do you actually start using video content as you're growing your business or just developing and growing your community in a more intentional way? Because that to me has been the bread and butter for my business. Just Facebook's platform has changed my life. It's the thing. I met my mother for the first time about 1.5 years ago. Wow. She found me on Facebook. And I look back and I'm just so thankful that God introduced me to Facebook and that to be the platform of how I've grown my business, which I think is really interesting how that all even played out. Because if I wasn't as visible, she may not have found me, or I really don't know. So, but the Lurker to Lightbulb challenge is a 3-day challenge that walks you through how to incorporate video content as you're growing and developing your business. Been able to get people just ridiculous results, helping them grow their audience, get their first paid client, get their next 4-figure client just by incorporating video content into their whole content schedule. So I would love to be able to share that with anybody on here who might be a little bit nervous to go live, and how to, build that confidence and get a really proven process and a solid structure to move forward with that.
Then Jereshia Hawk, is that your website?
Yeah, JereshiaHawk.com.
Okay. So, and Jereshia, I will tell you, I didn't spell your name right the first time I wrote it because I was trying to email you and it was not right. So I will definitely put it in the show notes. It's JereshiA and Hawk like the bird.com. So if you want to get in touch with her, is that challenge something that will pop up when they go to your site?
So if they visit bit.ly/lurker to lightbulb, it'll send them to an opt-in page and they can just enter their name and email address and get all the access.
Perfect. And I also think it's kind of cool because some of the people that may be listening aren't necessarily interested in business, but maybe holding back on some things and holding back from doing some things. Will this challenge help them just to be a little bit more visible and a little bit more confident in just sharing just on their personal page?
Oh, totally. If you think about just some people just doing live video just to just share what they're passionate about on their timeline, this totally can relate to both.
Oh, that's super cool. I like that too. Cause we never know who's listening. It's, we have a broad audience. And so I want to be able to make sure that people know that it's not segregated just for business people, but it's also a cool way to get to know you and what you do. So that's really awesome. Well, little Miss Thing, you are so awesome. And I am so thankful that you've been here, and your story is I'm sure we could talk for hours and hours, which is pretty normal on this show. I think I say that every single time. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. So I would love to have you back at a future date and we can talk about some more specific things. And if you'd be willing, I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, totally.
That's cool. That's great. So for now, thank you, Jereshia, for being here. You're just a blessing. You're a wonderful person. You're hilarious. You're beautiful. You're an inspiration. And I love watching what you do. You just get me fired up. It makes me want to be 27 and a half again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a ton of fun.
Everybody listening, this is the Bold, Brave, and Sassy Show. And, my intention in this show is always to encourage you to be the authentic, unapologetic you that you were born to be, that God designed you to be. And I hope that what we've talked about today has really inspired you to do that. Thank you so much for being here. Share it with your friends, subscribe, leave us a comment or a review. And then also you can always let us know if there's topics that you want me to tackle with certain guests or by myself. I'm happy to do that. I'll have all the information about this show in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.